My fellow citizens, since its introduction in 1983 by Consumers International, World Consumer Rights Day has been celebrated annually on March 15th. The vision of Consumers International is the creation of a world where every consumer has access to safe, sustainable goods and services, a world where the strength of the collective power is used for the good of the consumers throughout the world, with consumers now operating in a global marketplace increasingly dominated by international brands and large corporations. The institutionalization of the vision of Consumer International is vital not only within Skerritt and Nevis, but within the entire Caribbean. It is therefore my pleasure in this address to recognize the work that has been done by Consumers International as an advocate for consumers everywhere, and to thank them for their partnership with countries such as ours in protecting and empowering each of us as consumers. Nearly 30 years ago, April 9, 1985, the United Nations General Assembly adopted the UN Guidelines for Consumer Protection. These guidelines speak to 8 basic rights of consumer protection. These are the right to satisfaction of basic needs, the right to safety, the right to be informed, the right to choose, the right to be heard, the right to redress, the right to consumer education, and the right to a healthy environment. The celebration of a World Consumer Day annually helps to ensure that we are reminded of these individual rights and that they are promoted and defended. As consumers, we must all be aware of and internalize our basic rights and help to build momentum to achieve a more consumer-friendly country where suppliers of goods and services provide value for money while being held accountable for their promises to the consumers they serve. The government of Skerritt and Nevis is fully committed to the protection of all consumers, particularly the poor and most vulnerable in our society. Therefore, we support the United Nations Guidelines for Consumer Protection with the aim to maintain compliance with each of the rights outlined in this framework. In this regard, the Ministry of International Trade, Industry, Commerce and Consumer Affairs is working diligently to improve the quality of goods and services provided to consumers by promoting consumer awareness and assertiveness, and by providing a modern legislative regime and institutional framework that addresses the evolving needs and concerns of consumers. My ministry is committed to the view that a truly democratic country such as ours must embody, advance, and protect the rights of consumers. We must, as consumers, continue to be vigilant in the marketplace to ensure that all suppliers provide us with safe and good quality goods and services. When a consumer has expended his or her hard-earned income on food items and durable goods, or on services such as hotels and restaurants, banking, insurance, travel, legal, or even medical services, that consumer has a right to expect and should receive good quality in return for their expenditure. Suppliers of goods and services must also understand that what is fair and good for the consumer is good for business and ultimately good for profits. It is a well-documented fact that satisfied consumers spend more at the business enterprises that gives them the most satisfaction. This year, Consumer Rights Day is being commemorated around the world under the theme of Consumer Justice Now. It is my intention, as the recently appointed minister responsible for consumer affairs, to work diligently to improve consumer protection in our federation. Since my appointment just a few weeks ago, I have already learnt of reports of faulty products which cause injury, complaints against uncaring service providers, and irresponsible lending by at least one financial institution. You can be assured that better consumer protection will be a high priority for me as minister. The focus born out of this year's theme could not have come at a better time in the context of where we are as a developing country. The right to redress is one of the 8 basic consumer rights, which simply means that consumers have the right to engage suppliers and to have their problems heard and solved. However, I am well aware that this right is being undermined by some service providers. Within our federation, consumers are too often faced with challenges which range from high interest rates, unfair and unclear contract terms, or an erratic supply of the product. Consumers must be made aware that under the laws of our federation, there is indeed an avenue for consumers to seek redress and be heard if their service providers do not uphold their end of their agreement. Our ministry is also taking positive steps to protect residents against marketing campaigns and business practices that are aimed to mislead the public or garner as much profit as possible without regard for the consumer. This type of safeguard is evident in Section 35 of the Consumer Affairs Act of 2003, which prohibits misleading and deceptive practices in connection with the promotion, supply, or sale of goods and services. Section 30 also makes reference to protecting consumers from contract terms that have been forced upon them and were not individually negotiated between supplier and consumer. The government will continue to advocate for level playing field between service providers and consumers, particularly in the area of financial services. These efforts will be aimed towards holding service providers accountable for compliance with well-established international standards. It is my intention, my fellow citizens, to ensure that citizens become aware that the Consumer Affairs Department of my ministry will be taking a more proactive stance on behalf of consumers and will be doing its best to ensure that all traded perishable foods are fit for consumption. The public should be aware that the employees left over from the recent closure of the supply office have all been absorbed by the Consumer Affairs Department, thus allowing for both an increase in the frequency and a more detailed inspection of food vendors. This larger employee pool has already resulted in an increase in the identification of unfit food supplies by the Consumer Affairs Department. In this regard, I'm appealing to the public to assist the Consumer Affairs Department and to protect your own health by carefully scrutinizing what you buy from supermarkets, shops, and other food vendors. Food that is expired or unfit for consumption should be brought to the attention of the owners of these establishments immediately. In the event of inaction by the owners, then consumers should forward the report of this offense to the Consumer Affairs Department. These new Consumer Affairs officers have also been making regular visits to small shops to ensure that retailers are not overcharging for items previously sold by the supply office. Although evaporated milk, rice, flour, and sugar are no longer imported by government, they remain on the list of items under government price control with stipulated markups. Other government agencies that have been making positive contributions in protecting consumers in our country include the NTRC, National Telecom Regulatory Commission, and the FSRC, the Financial Services Regulatory Commission. The NTRC was established in accordance with the Eastern Caribbean Telecommunications Authority Treaty and the Telecommunications Act of 2000. Its main purpose is to regulate the telecommunications market in St. Kitts and Nevis, and this is done in collaboration with ECTEL, the Eastern Caribbean Telecommunications Authority, so as to ensure fair and competitive practices by telecommunications providers while maintaining high standards and affordable prices for all residents. The Financial Regulatory Commission, the FRC, was established under the Financial Services Regulatory Commission Act No. 22 of 2009 to regulate the non-bank financial sector, which includes insurance companies, both domestic and captive, private pension plans, money services businesses, credit unions, and trust and corporate service providers. Consumers are reminded to think and choose wisely when conducting transactions with the financial services sector. For although the government offers some avenues of protection, the ultimate protector of your consumer rights is you yourself. All consumers are reminded to read all contracts carefully or have them read for you to ensure that you're not being taken advantage of within the terms of the very same contract. The ongoing rise in cost of food throughout the world has caused my ministry to refocus intently on the implementation of the Price Control Order SRO 41 of 2007. This gives the Consumer Affairs Department legislative power to enforce the prescribed margins on the list of goods therein. At a meeting last week, I called on the officers of the department to more vigorously monitor wholesalers and retailers to ensure that the prices charged for price control items fall within the prescribed government markup margins. The department has strengthened the auditing arm with 8 additional price control officers who will be essential to fulfilling the government's mandate of ensuring that food prices are kept at a minimum and suppliers are in compliance with the price control order. The list of price control items and zero-rated VAT items will also be reviewed very shortly by my ministry with a view to bringing price relief to consumers wherever further possible or viable. In closing, I want to emphasize that the efforts of our government to strengthen consumer protection is by no means an attempt to stifle the efforts of local business to be profitable. This government has a proud record of facilitating a positive investment climate and encouraging profitability. The national legislative framework and supporting administrative mechanisms of which I speak provide the appropriate complement of an enabling business environment for business development and expansion, while also allowing for a fair, transparent, mutually beneficial relationship between service provider and consumer. I ask that you support my ministry's efforts over the coming weeks, and especially over this week, to raise consumer awareness through our activities around the theme Consumer Justice Now. This will include our celebration of World Consumer Rights Day on Friday, March 15th, with a walk through the streets of Bastille by students and members of staff of our ministry. I thank all of our Consumer Affairs Department staff and our many sponsors who have made this year's week of activities possible. May God bless this Consumer Rights Week of activities, and may we achieve our desire for a more harmonious partnership between consumers and suppliers in this our beloved country. Thank you for listening.